We're up to Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis. Amar V'Yud Amar Rav, the top line. Amar V'Yud Amar Rav. Now last time we discussed about if one gives a klala, one gives a curse al for lechinam. If one gives a curse al chinam for nothing, it's not going to stick. As opposed to when a Talmud Chacham gives a curse, then it sticks, even if it's on condition. Now the Gemara, going on that, the Gemara says Yud Alpha and Beis, top line. Amar B'Yehuda Amar Rav, nidoy al tanai. Nidoy is excommunication. If somebody puts somebody else or himself in chirim al tanai, on condition, tzarech hafara, it needs to be nullified. As we know, the halacha is when somebody's in chirim, somebody's excommunicated, he stays in excommunication until it's nullified. Here the chiddush is that even if it was on condition and that condition was fulfilled, so there shouldn't be any chirim, you still need a hafara. Minalam, where do we know this? We know this from Yehuda. We know this from Yehuda, the Shevet Yehuda. The Chsiv, it says, quote, Im lo hevesi elecha. The end of that pasuk, when Yehuda was trying to convince Yaakov, his father, to send Binyamin down to Mitzrayim. So he said, if I don't bring him back and stand him up in front of you, then I will sin to you all my days. Which means, basically, Rashi explains over there, he was saying, I am forfeiting my chelik in Olam Haba. I'm forfeiting my life in the next world if I don't bring back Binyamin and stand him in front of you. Now we know the end of the story was nothing happened to Binyamin. Binyamin was fine, and therefore one would think, therefore Yehuda did not deserve to be excommunicated in the next world. That's what you would think. But the Gemara says, in lo vesi olecha, and still the Gemara says, v'amar Shmuel bar, so that was the pasuk. V'amar Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Yonasan, ma'idich siv, what is it that it's written, quote, Yechi Ruvain va'al Yamus. This is talking about in the Psukim, at the end of, in Zos HaBracha. It says, Yechi Ruvain va'al Yamus v'zos Yehuda. Right? It puts Yehuda right next to Ruvain. Now, why does it put Ruvain right next to Yehuda in the Psukim? The Gemara says, Kol osam men mishana shehai Yisrael midbar, all 40 years that Klal Yisrael were walking through the desert, atzmosav shel Yehuda haimu gugalim ba'aron. The bones of Yehuda were rolling around in his coffin. So in other words, for our purposes, we really proved what we wanted, but obviously the Gemara is going to continue. But the point of the Gemara is that Yehuda said, I'll be excommunicated in the next world. And that's actually what happened. Because you see, for 40 years, Rashi explains, while the Jews were wandering in the desert, all the bones of every single Shevet, it wasn't just Yosef, they took the bones of every Shevet out of Mitzrayim and they brought them up to Eretz Yisrael. Everybody's coffin was intact, except for Yehuda. The bones in his basically the bones of his whole skeleton were just rolling around in the urn. That was his excommunication. So we see from here that even though Yehuda made a condition, he said, if I don't bring back Binyamin to you, I deserve it. But at the end of the day, he did bring Binyamin back. So you'd think he wouldn't be excommunicated. The chiddush is, Rav is telling you that no, when you make it on condition, it still needs to be nullified. And the excommunication does take hold. And that's exactly what happened here. Until Moshe Rabbeinu davened for his behalf and asked Hashem to forgo it and to forgive him. So again, that's what it means. They were rolling around in the coffin. Until Moshe got up and Moshe davened. Bikish Lav Rachman, he requested compassion on his behalf. What did he say? Amar Lefanav, Ribono Shalom, Master of the world. Mi garam leReuven sheyoda. Who caused you, Reuven, to admit? We know Reuven did a sin. He switched the beds of his mother, whatever that means. And we know he admitted his crime and he did tshuva. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, where did Reuven learn such a thing? To stand up and admit that you did an Aveira and to go through the tshuva process. So he said, where did he learn it from? Yehuda. So Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, Reuven learned this from Yehuda. So v'zos Yehuda, this should happen to Yehuda. Now we understand what's the connection, why it says Reuven right next to Yehuda, and it says a language, v'zos Yehuda, this is to Yehuda. Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, it doesn't make sense. Reuven did tshuva only because he saw Yehuda did it. We know Yehuda did tshuva when in his Beis Din, when he realized that the story with Tamar, when he admitted, he got up in Beis Din and said, this baby that Tamar is pregnant from is from me, and he admitted it barabim publicly. From there, Reuven learned, that you could publicly admit something and you could do tshuva. So Moshe Rabbeinu is saying it's not fair that Yehuda should suffer if all the merits of Reuven doing tshuva are on you because of Yehuda. So that's what he said. V'zos Yehuda, this should happen to Yehuda. And then Moshe Rabbeinu davened, Shema Hashem kol Yehuda. Hashem should listen to the voice of Yehuda. And then the Gemara says, Al Ivrei L'Shafrei. So his limbs started going back into their places in the coffin. The limbs started connecting. Now the Gemara says, Lo have kamayle le'mesifta derakia. They still weren't allowing Yehuda's neshama to go up to the mesifta derakia, which means the yeshiva in the heavens. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, okay, I succeeded in getting his bones together, but he's still not allowed into the yeshiva in heaven. So Moshe Rabbeinu davened, quote, Vel amo tivienu. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, you should bring him to his nation, meaning allow him into the Beis Medrash. So evidently that happened. Lo have kayada lemishkal umitrach b'shmaitze b'hadi rabbanan. He still, even though they let him in the Beis Medrash, Yehuda, he still wasn't able to take part in the give and take what's going on in the Beis Medrash in the heaven. So therefore Moshe Rabbeinu davened, quote, Yadav Rav Lo, his hands should be abundant with him, meaning he should be able to take part in what's going on. So that was the request was granted. Still, Lo Havi Yada Lefruke Kusha, he still wasn't able to answer questions, and therefore he davened, quote, Ve'ezer Mitzaravtiya, he should be a help for his foes, he should be, end quote. So in other words, that's the end of the Gemara. But the point was, the Gemara is going through these psukim, which are all right next to each other, the bracha of Yehuda. But the point was, this is Moshe Rabbeinu constantly davening, let Yehuda's neshama rise to go to the yeshiva, to take part in what's going on, the learning of the Torah in the yeshiva, Shamala, and to actually answer questions, and to be, the Gemara in Sota says a little differently, La suke shmaita aliba dehochsa, to be able to complete the sugya and bring it la halacha. But again, for our purposes, the point is that you see that a nidoi, even al tanai, even on condition, still needs to be nullified. Good, and now we go back to our Mishnah finally. If you'll remember, we spoke about, the Mishnah says, the Mishnah on Amud Aleph, Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, the Mishnah says that if one of the three says there are three Kohanim Gedolim who die, they send the guy out of Gullus. Right? We spoke about the one who is anointed with oil, the one who has the extra begadim, or the one who is removed from his post. Now the Gemara asks, so we have three different psukim saying three different Kohanim Gedolim. Ibailu, they ask the following question: B'misas kulan hu chozer, does he go back only if all of them die? And as we have three psukim proven that there's three types of Kohen Gedolim. So does the murderer, does he need all three people to die for him to leave the Ari Miklat? O Dilma, or perhaps b'misas echamim, or perhaps even one of them dying is enough to let him go free. In other words, is it all three have to die, or any one of these three? So the Gemara says, Tashma, let's see if we can bring a proof from the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah says, Nigmar dino below Kohen Gadol. If his din, his final judgment was finalized when there was no Kohen Gadol. We'll talk about that in the next Mishnah. But at the time when Beis Din decided this guy has to go to Gullus, if there was no Kohen Gadol in the world at that time, Eino Yotzim Misham L'Olam, he goes to Gullus and he doesn't go out ever. He's stuck there forever, till the end of his life, because there has to be a Kohen Gadol at the time of when he was paskin to go to Gullus. When they decide he has to go to Gullus, there has to be a Kohen Gadol. If there's no Kohen Gadol then, so he can't go back with the death of a Kohen Gadol, because that wasn't his Kohen Gadol, so to speak, which we'll talk about that. Now, the Gemara says, V'im Isa, if it's so that he could go back with any one of these three, so Lahadar bin Hanach, let him go back with one of the other ones. The Gemara is asking, true, there's not the real Kohen Gadol, but there might be another Kohen Gadol. There might be the one who's removed from his post. There might be the one who has the extra begadim. So the Gemara is asking, obviously you need all three, because if it's any single one of these three, so just because there wasn't the active Kohen Gadol at the time, but maybe one of the other two Kohanim Gedolim were around. So why is he stuck there forever? Seemingly, it's a raya that you need all three to die. To which the Gemara answers, no proof. Bidaleka. Maybe he's talking about, when it says there was no Kohen Gadol at the time, there was also no Kohen Gadol who was anointed, there was no Kohen Gadol with Merub Begadim, there was no Kohen Gadol who was removed from his post, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, there was no Kohen Gadol who went out to war. The Mishnah is talking about in a case where there wasn't any of these things. So at the end of the day, the Gemara has no proof, and it's unclear, at least from this Gemara, whether it means all three or it means only one. Which brings us to the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah says, Mishin Nigmar Dino Meis Kohen Gadol. If after Nigmar Din, means his verdict was given out, he already got a verdict. Gemar Din means the end of the judgment. But So if after the verdict was given out, Mace Kohen Gadol, the Kohen Gadol died, right? So Beis Din sat down with this guy and they paskin he needs to go to Gullus. And before he got a chance to go, all of a sudden, 5 minutes later, the Kohen Gadol died. Hareza Eino Gola, he does not go to Gullus because the Kohen Gadol died. We'll see in the Gemara what exactly the logic behind that is. But as soon as the Kohen, if it's after his Gemar Din, so he's Chayav Gullus, the Kohen Gadol died, so now he's Pater. Instead of him going and coming out, he just doesn't have to go. Now, next case, Imad Shelo Nigmar Dino Meis Kohen Gadol, if before they gave out his verdict, they didn't decide yet, the Kohen Gadol died, before they finished the court case, Uminu Achar Tachtav, and they appointed another Kohen Gadol, Ula Achar Mikan Nigmar Dino, and then they gave a verdict that he has to go to the Ari Miklat. So the question is, when does he go free? Chozer b'misasa shoshini, then he goes back with the death of the second Kohen Gadol. So in other words, the point over here is, it doesn't go by while your court case is going on. It goes by when the Gemar Din, whoever was the Kohen Gadol at the time of your Gemar Din, the final psak in Beis Din, that you have to go to Gullus, at that time, whoever was the serving Kohen Gadol, that when that guy dies, then you could go out. Next, Nigmar Dino below Kohen Gadol. Let's say, this is what we quoted before, if his din was Nigmar below Kohen Gadol, there was no Kohen Gadol at the time, for whatever reason, they didn't reappoint a new one, there was no Kohen Gadol. And Nigmar Dino, they paskened on him, he has to go to Gullus. Or, Vahori Kohen Gadol, somebody who kills a Kohen Gadol. Or, Kohen Gadol Sheharag, or the Kohen Gadol himself who killed. All three of these cases, Einu Yotzim Misham L'Olam, he doesn't leave there forever. This guy is going to be in Gullus until he dies. Because there's nothing that could save him. Because if your Gemar Din happened without a Kohen Gadol, so the death of a Kohen Gadol is not going to help you. Because we'll see in the Psukim, the point is he has to be there until the Kohen Gadol who was there at the time of his verdict dies. But if there's no Kohen Gadol at the time of your verdict, so you can't leave ever. You're going to be stuck in Gullus forever. Now the Mishnah speaks out, Ve'ena Yotze Lo Le'edus Mitzvah. Once a guy goes to Gullus, now the Mishnah is going to describe what happens when he goes to Gullus. Ve'enu Yotze Lo Le'edus Mitzvah. He doesn't go out to testify even for a mitzvah. V'lo Le'edus Mammon, and not for any monetary matters. Meaning, even if he's the key witness for any case, whether it's a mitzvah case or it's a monetary case, he doesn't leave. V'lo Le'edus Nefashos, even to testify. The guy, the murderer, he's in the Ari Miklat, and Beis Din needs him because he's the key witness to Reuven killing Shimon. Still, he doesn't leave. We're not going to let him leave the city. He has to stay there. V'afilu Yisrael tzrichim lo. The Mishnah says, even if Klai Yisrael needs him, v'afilu tzar tzava Yisrael kiyov ben Srua, even if he is the leading general, tzar tzava, he's the general leading the army, and Klai Yisrael needs him, eino yotze misham la'olam, he does not leave there forever. He does not leave until the Kohen Gadol dies. But if the Kohen Gadol does not die, or any of the cases we saw before, he doesn't leave. There's no excuse for him to leave whatsoever. Not for a mitzvah, not for testimony, not to save Klai Yisrael. He's stuck there. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, quote, Asher nashama, that he should flee there, end quote. And we learn from there, Shamte diraso, that's where he should live. Shamte misaso, that's where his death should be. He should die there, meaning he should live to be 120, but he should be there for 120 years. Shamte kfuraso, and he actually gets buried there. So the guy who goes, again, assuming that the Kohen Gadol did not die, or in the situation when there is no Kohen Gadol at the time of his verdict, the guy goes there, he lives there, his entire life he will live out there, and he'll be buried there. He has no excuse to come out. Now the Mishnah says, Kshem she'ir kolet, that's just like the city protects, kach tchuma kolet, so too the tchum of the city. The tchum of the city is basically 2,000 amas around the city. We know on Shabbos, one's not allowed to walk more than 2,000 amas outside the city parameters. So the perimeter of the city, you have 2,000 amas from every direction. That's called the tchum of the city, on all directions. 2,000 amas, you go out 2,000 amas, and then you basically draw like a circle or square. It's exactly how you do it. It's a machlokes in Masechta Eruvin. But either way, whatever you consider tchum, so now we know when the murderer is in the refuge city, nobody's allowed to touch him. Nobody's allowed to kill him. The Gol Adam is not allowed to touch him. That's why it's called a refuge city. He's there, and it atones for him. It's a kapara, and also it's a safe haven for him. You're not allowed to kill him in that city. Now, if he leaves that city, he's free game for somebody to kill him, as we'll see. But what the Mishnah is saying is the tchum of the city is like the city, and therefore, even if he steps out of the actual city, but he's still in the 2,000 amas around the city, he's also protected. You're not allowed to touch him. That's the point again. Kshem she'ir kolet is just like the city protects. Kach tchuma kolet, so too the tchum of the city protects. Now the Mishnah says, Rotzeach sheyatza chutz l'tchum. If the rotzeach, the murderer, he left the tchum, he went past 2,000 amas. Umatza gol adam, and now the gol adam finds him. He's supposed to be in the Ir Miklat. He has no heter to leave whatsoever. Right? Let's say the Kohen Gadol did not die yet, or there is no Kohen Gadol, whatever. He has no right to leave the city, and he actually leaves, and he leaves the tchum. So Rabbi Yossi Omer, mitzvah biyad gol adam. It's a mitzvah for the gol adam to kill him, because this guy is supposed to be punished and be in the Ir Miklat. If he leaves, the gol adam not only could, but the gol adam should kill him. V'rishus biyad kol adam, and it's optional anybody else. So the gol adam has a mitzvah to kill him, and everybody else has an option to kill him. That's Rabbi Yossi Glili. Rabbi Kiva says, lower it down a little bit. Rishus biyad gol adam, it's optional for the gol adam. The kol adam and any other person, the Mefarshim changed the gears over here, should say v'chol adam ein chayav alav. Anybody who kills him is not chayav if they kill him. That doesn't mean you should kill him. It doesn't mean it's not a mitzvah and it's not even permissible. But if you did it, b'di'evad, you're not going to be tried and you won't be put to death for it. You're not chayav on it. So again, we have a machlokas over here. If the guy leaves the city, he leaves the tchum, he leaves the city. So according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, the Gol Adam has a mitzvah to kill him. Everybody else, it's not a mitzvah, but they could. As opposed to, according to Rabbi Akiva, the Gol Adam has an option to kill him. Everybody else, I wouldn't even call it an option. You're not supposed to kill him. Just, if you did, you won't be tried and based in for it. And we'll see in the Gemara exactly where that comes from. It's based on how to learn the pasuk. Now, the Gemara says, my timer, what's the reason? The Gemara is going on the first line of the Mishnah, where the Mishnah says, Mishin nigmar dino meis kohen gadol. If after you got your verdict, the kohen gadol dropped dead 5 minutes later, you don't even have to go to Galus. If you didn't make it there yet, don't go. So Gemara says, my timer, what's the reason? Amar Abaye says, kal v'chomer, very simple, kal v'chomer. Uma mishagila kfar. If somebody who already was exiled, yatsa achshav, he goes out now, kama, mishalo galas, somebody who never went exiled, eno din, is it not logical, shalo yigle, he should not go to exile? In other words, the Gemara, this is what Abaye is saying. If a guy would already have been in the Ir Miklat and the Kohen Gadol dies, what happens? He goes out, he's free. So for sure, kal v'chomer, if I didn't get there yet, and then the Kohen Gadol dies, all the more so I don't have to go. It's a simple kal v'chomer. To which the Gemara asks, not so fast, not such a good kal v'chomer, v'dilma perhaps, hai de gala ichberlei. If you went to Galus, even if you went for 5 minutes, once you went to Galus, that itself was part of your atonement. Hai de lo gala lo, but this, who never went to Galus, does not get an atonement. The Gemara is asking on the kal v'chomer of Abaye, it's not a good kal v'chomer. You're telling me if a guy went to Galus and the Kohen Gadol died, he goes free, so for sure if I didn't go yet, then I don't have to go to Galus at all. The Gemara is asking, what do you mean? If he went to Galus, at least he got his atonement, because going to Galus itself, going into exile, is a form of atonement. But if you never went yet, who says that exempts you? That's the Gemara's question. The Gemara answers with a question. Midi Galus kamachapra, you think at all Galus atones? The Galus is not what atones and allows you out. Misas Kohen Gadol de mechapra, the death of the Kohen Gadol is what atones. So in other words, the Gemara is saying that the atonement over here is not the actual going to Galus. The atonement is the Kohen Gadol dying. So if the Kohen Gadol dying after I'm in Galus allows me to leave, all the more so if I never went yet, the death of the Kohen Gadol should atone. And therefore Abaye's kal v'chomer stands, and that's the reason of the Mishnah. Next, we go into the next line of the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Imach lo nigmar dino. The Gemara says, Minan Emili, how do we know these words? Amar Kra. So in other words, how do we know, Amar Rav Kahana. So how do we know these words? Going on the next case in the Mishnah, which is that if the Kohen Gadol died, and after he killed, the Kohen Gadol died, and then they appointed a new Kohen Gadol before his Gemar Din, and then there was a Gemar Din, then he only goes out of Galus with the death of the second Kohen Gadol. Basically, the Kohen Gadol who is alive at the time of his verdict. The Gemara says, Minan Mili Amar of Kahana Damar Kra, the pasuk says, quote, V'yesheba, he should sit there in his city. Ad mos ha-kohen gadol, until the kohen gadol dies. Asher mashach oso b'shemen hakodesh, which literally means which he anointed him with the shemen hakodesh, the holy oil. Now, end quote. The Gemara asks, "V'chi hu moshcho?" Do you think he anointed the kohen gadol? What does it mean? Asher mashach oso, that he anointed him. Mashach oso, that he was anointed. What does that have to do with the murderer? The murderer does not anoint kohen gadols. V'chi hu moshcho? Did he anoint him? Ella, rather, zeh shenimshach biyamav. What it means is the one who is anointed in his times. So it means the one who is anointed at the time of, once he became a rotzech, and this guy was, once he became a murderer, and this guy was anointed, that's the kohen gadol who's going to let you go free when he dies. Now the Gemara asks, "My havle lemevet, what should he have done?" What the Gemara is asking is, last time we learned that the fault of the kohen gadol over here is, the reason why it's linked to the kohen gadol's death is because kohen gadol should have died, that this person should not have killed by accident. But if the murderer already murdered, and then the new kohen gadol only was appointed after he murdered, and he was appointed, and then there was a verdict, so why is it dependent on this guy and the kohen gadol's death? What did the kohen gadol do wrong now? Right? He wasn't even around. He wasn't the kohen gadol at the time of the death, of the murder. So Gemara says, "My havle mevid." What did this kohen gadol? What should he have done? What did the kohen gadol do wrong? Gemara says, "Haylo levakesh rachmim." He should have davened. He should have sought compassion. Sheyigmar dinu lischus. He should have davened that this person's din should come out for good. Velo bikesh, and he didn't. He obviously didn't do a good enough job. He didn't request hard enough, and that's why he's a little bit at fault for this. Good. Now a little bit of a new thing over here. Amar Bayi naktinan. Naktinan means we take on, we paskin. Nigmar dino umes. So let's say the murderer got a verdict, and before he had a chance to go to the Ir Miklat, he dropped dead. He had a heart attack in Beis Din right after they gave the verdict. So he was chayiv galus, but he never had the opportunity to go to galus because he himself dropped dead. Molichin es atzmos alisham. We bring his bones there, and we actually bring him there, and we bury him in the Ir Miklat. Dechsev, it says, quote, Lashuv lashevetz be'eretz, he should return to dwell in the land, ad mos ha-kohen, until the kohen dies, end quote. Ve'ezu yeshiva shibaretz, what does it mean he should dwell in the land? What does it mean dwelling in the land? Haveyomer, you should say, zu kfura, this is referring to burial. So what the pasuk is hinting to, that even if the guy never made it there alive, but if he was chayav galus and he got a verdict, he goes there even in death. You bring his bones there and you bury him. Tani, we learned in a different brisa, meis koinem shemeis kohen gadol. Now this is a different thing. Let's say he died before the kohen gadol dies. In other words, a fellow went to Gullus, and when he's in Gullus, he died in Gullus. Okay, so he died in Gullus, and obviously the halacha is you bury him there, as the Mishnah says, shamtei kfuraso. Right, the murderer went to Gullus. He was in Gullus for 30 years, and he lived out his years, and he died over there. They buried him in the Ir Miklat. And then, after 30 years later, what happens is the kohen gadol eventually dies. Now what? So it says, Molichin atzmosav al kivrei avosav. You take his bones out of there and you bring it back to his family cemetery, which is not in the Ir Miklat, wherever it is. Dechsev, it says, quote, Yoshuv harotzeach el eretz hachuzasa. The rotzeach should return to his eretz hachuzasa, to the land of his heritage. End quote. So in other words, the pasuk is talking about when the kohen gadol dies, then the rotzeach leaves his city and he goes back to his to the land of his ancestors. Now, Ezu Yeshiva Shibaretz, it says, the pasuk says he goes Yeshiva Ba'aretz, what is called dwelling in the land. What does it mean dwelling Be'eretz Achuzaso, in the land of his Achuza? Haveyomer, you must say, Zu Kfura, this is referring to burial. So what the pasuk, there's a different pasuk. Again, the first pasuk we brought was that it says he should be buried over there, meaning if he never got there and he died, the Kohen Gadol didn't die yet, then you bury him there. That's a chiddush number one. Chiddush number two is, if he lived out his years in the Ir Miklat, and you buried him in the Ir Miklat, and then the Kohen Gadol dies, take him out and you bring him le'eretz achuzosav, to the land of his heritage, to his forefathers, and you put him in that land. Meaning you take him out of the burial site over there and move him to a different burial site outside the Ir Miklat. Now, the Gemara discusses another interesting scenario. Nigmar dino. So let's say there was a verdict. There's only one Kohen Gadol. There was a Kohen Gadol around. And Nigmar dino. So they paskined a Gemar din. They gave out the verdict of the murderer. And there's a Kohen Gadol there. V'nasek Kohen ben Grusha or ben Chalutza. And then they found out that the Kohen Gadol, actually they looked into the Kohen Gadol's lineage, and the Kohen Gadol was actually a ben Gerusha. He's the son of a divorcee. Now, as we know this from Daf Beis, that if a Kohen marries a divorcee, that child is not a Kohen. That child is called a Halal. Right? He lost all rights to the Kuna. He is definitely not a Kohen Gadol, and he's not a Kohen. So now you have an interesting situation. We know that once the verdict was given, and then the Kohen Gadol dies, then the guy goes scot-free. Here you have a situation where the verdict was given, and then the Kohen Gadol was found to never have been a Kohen Gadol the whole time. So how do you look at that? Is that the same thing as Kohen Gadol dying, or is that saying you had a din without a Kohen Gadol? So the Gemara says, Pligi bar Rav Ami, Rav Yitzchak Nafcha. Rav Ami and Yitzchak Nafcha have an argument about this. Chad Amar, one says, Mesa Kahuna. It's like the Kohen died. The Kahuna died over here, meaning this guy's Kahuna stopped and it just ended. And that's equivalent to a Kohen Gadol dying. And therefore, the fellow does not have to go to Galus. It's like the Kohen Gadol died. V'chad Amar, one says, Batla Kahuna. Batla Kahuna means the Kahuna was nullified. It just shows you that this guy was never a Kohen Gadol the whole time. And therefore, if you look at Rashi explains the bottom Rashi, Igloi milsel and mafreya. It shows retroactively, Shiloh Kohen Gadol. He never was a Kohen Gadol. It's not like he was a Kohen Gadol till now and it stopped. If his mother was a Grusha and his father was a Kohen, that means he never was a Kohen Gadol. We were mistaken the whole time. And therefore, this fellow is like somebody whose verdict was given without a Kohen Gadol. Ve'eno chozer la'olam, he never leaves the Ir Miklat. So you have very interesting machlokas over here. On one hand, one mandamar is saying that in this, again, the scenario is where a guy killed, he was tried in Beis Din, there was a Kohen Gadol at the time, there was a psak, he's supposed to go to Galus. And then what happened was, it was found that the Kohen Gadol was not really a Kohen Gadol. So one mandamar says, okay, that's the same thing as a Kohen Gadol dying, and therefore he's patur from going to Galus. The other mandamar says the exact opposite. He didn't die. All that happened was you realize he never was a Kohen Gadol. And therefore, if he never was a Kohen Gadol, basically what happened was, if we could go back in time, if we would have known this information, basically you had a verdict given without a Kohen Gadol, which means your halacha status is, like the Mishnah says, if you had a verdict without a Kohen Gadol, you go to Galus and you stay there forever. So two total extremes over here. One man number says, you don't have to go to Galus. The other man number says, not only do you have to go to Galus, but you're never getting out of there forever. Because nobody dying is going to help you. That's the machlokas over here. So again, the yesod of the machlokas is when we know the guy's a ben grusha, ben chalutza, how do we look at that? Do we look at it as like it just stopped now? Or do we look at it like retroactively it never happened? So the Gemara says, Lema, let's suggest, plukta the Rabbi Lazar Yeshua Kamefagi, seemingly these two Amarayim over here, who is Rav Ami and Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, we don't know who said what, but they're arguing, they're Amarayim. Seemingly they're saying the same argument as Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Lazar. Who's Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Lazar? T'tznan. We have a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, if a fellow is standing and he's bringing karbanas on the Mizbeach, yeah, you have a Kohen, regular Kohen, he's serving in the base of Mikdash, he's bringing karbanas. And then while he's in the middle bringing a carbon, somebody taps him on the shoulder and says, by the way, I just want to let you know, your mother was a grusha and your father was a Kohen. You're not a Kohen, you're really a halal. So Rabbi Eliezer Amar, call karbanas shehikriv psulin. Rabbi Eliezer says all the karbanas that he brought are puzzle. So if he brought a carbon 5 minutes ago and you want to eat that carbon, don't eat it because it was brought by somebody who is not a Kohen. Because it was revealed that he never was a Kohen because his mother was a grusha. That makes him a halal. There's no suffix by that. He's definitely a halal. So Rabbi Eliezer says that shows retroactively the carbon you did 5 minutes ago or whatever you did your whole life is worthless. Don't eat those karbanas. They're all puzzle. For example, if somebody brought a carbon through the hands of this Kohen, could have been 5 weeks ago, but if you thought you got a carbon chatas, you brought a carbon chatas for a sin you did, and you brought it through this Kohen, well, guess what? You have to bring a new one now. Anything this guy did was puzzle because he never was a Kohen. Rabbi Yeshua machshir. Rabbi Yeshua says it's kosher. Rabbi Yeshua says, okay, fine, he should step down from the kuna from here and on, but it doesn't retroactively uproot everything he did retroactively. That's the machlokas over here. So the Gemara wants to. So again, the Machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and Yeshua, who are Tanaim, have a Machlokes, and they're basically saying, one saying, when you find out you're Ben Grusha, retroactively everything you did was worthless because you never were a Kohen. Retroactively. The other man number says, no, it doesn't work retroactively. Now that I know this, from now on, but everything else is kosher in the meantime. Now this sounds very similar to our argument between Rav Ami and Rav Yitzchak Nafcha. The Gemara says, Man Damar Mesa, the one who says by us that the kahuna is like it's Mesa, it's like he died, meaning it goes from here and on, not retroactively, is Rabbi Yeshua. Seemingly, he's like Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua says the karbanis in the past are good, and you just look at it from here and in the future, is like the one who says that's like the Kohen Gadol dying, and the guy does not have to go to Gullus. Umandam or Batla, and the one who says Batla, that no, it shows retroactively that you never had a Kohen Gadol at your verdict, is Rabbi Elazar, like Rabbi Elazar says the karbanos retroactively are no good. So Gemara is saying, seemingly, our machlokas is the same machlokas as those two Tanaim. To which the Gemara answers, Aliba de Rabbi Elazar kuli alma lo pligi. In the words of Rabbi Elazar, I should say Rabbi Eliezer, in the words of Rabbi Eliezer, who says, it goes retroactively, and everything is puzzle, nobody argues. What that means is, Rashi explains, what that means is, you're right. According to Rabbi Eliezer, if the karbanos retroactively are puzzle, so of course by us also he would say the same thing, and he would say, retroactively there never was a Kohen Gadol, and therefore this guy goes to Galus forever, and the other man Amar cannot fit into his opinion. That's what it means. Kol Yam Lo Pligi. Nobody argues in Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. If you would take Rabbi Eliezer from over there and try to put him into what would he say in our situation, everybody agrees in our situation it's Pashut. He would say retroactively the guy was never a Kohen Gadol, and therefore you're going to Galus and you'll be there forever. Ki Pligi. Where's the argument between Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha and Rav Ami? Alib de Rabbi Yeshua. They're arguing in the position of Rabbi Yeshua, who says that by the karbanas it's only messed up from here and on, not retroactively. And that you could debate, what would Rabbi Yeshua say in the case of the Kohen Gadol with a murderer? Why? Mandamar Mesa Rabbi Yeshua, the one who says, we look at it like the Kohen Gadol was here and he died, is similar to Rabbi Yeshua. But Mandamar Batla, the one who says Batla, that we retroactively, by us, we say retroactively, he's saying, I could even fit in Rabbi Yeshua's opinion also. Why? Adkam lo kam Rabbi Yeshua hasa. Rabbi Yeshua only said it over there. The Chsiv, it says, quote, Barech Hashem chelo. Hashem blesses chelo. Upol yadav tirtzeh. And the pol yadav, which means the work of your hands, tirtzeh, God wants. And we learn from there, afilu, see the word chelo. Afilu chalalun shabo. Even the halal, if, in other words, we have a special pasuk that's saying, even if you are halal at the time, and you didn't know it at the time, so, okay, b'diavad, we accept your carbon. But in our case, I feel Rabbi Shua Moda, even Rabbi Shua would agree. Basically, what the Gemara is saying is, Rabbi Shua says over there that the karbanos retroactively are still good. That's because you have a special pasuk. The pasuk says, even if you are halal at the time you brought the carbon, but you didn't know about it at the time, special pasuk permitting those karbanos. But when it comes to our situation, if a guy had a verdict, and then there was a Kohen Gadol, and we found out afterwards the Kohen Gadol was no good. So now Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha and Rav Ami are having a machlokas. What would Rabbi Yeshua say about that? So one man Damar says, well, the same thing he says over there, the same way he says retroactively everything's good. Here also retroactively it's good, and it's like you had a psak din with Kohen Gadol. The other man Damar says, no. Rabbi Yeshua is only saying it over there because of that special pasuk permitting karbanis. But but by our machlokes, even Rabbi Yeshua would agree that retroactively it uproots everything. So therefore, basically, what the Gemara is saying is, in Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, it's clear what Rabbi Eliezer would say over here. The argument is, what would Rabbi Yeshua say over there? Do we say Rabbi Yeshua the same way he says over there, retroactively it's good? Here also, retroactively, he was a Kohen Gadol? Or do we say, no, that's only by Karbanas, but not over here? So good, if we could summarize what we have over here. We started with the top of the page, where we said nidoy al tanai, so one gets excommunicated or excommunicates himself, even on condition he needs a kapara, he needs to nullify that, he needs a hafara. And we brought the raya from Yehuda, where Yehuda's bones were rolling around in the urn the whole time until Moshe Rabbeinu davened. Then we had the question about, and then the Gemara talks about how he davened. Then we had the question about, we talked about the Kohen Gadol dying, 3 different types of Kohen Gadolim, Is it all three or only one? The Gemara tried bringing a raya, but the Gemara knocked it off. There's no raya at the end of the day. Then we had the Mishnah, and the Mishnah says, if after Nigmar Dino the Kohen Gadol dies, he does not go to Gullus. Why? So the Gemara told us, it's a Kal V'chomer. If you're already in Gullus, you go free. For sure, if you never went, then you go free. To which the Gemara says, well, maybe only if you actually got to Gullus, you have a kapara. To which the Gemara says, the Gullus is not what does the kapara. The death of the Kohen Gadol is what does the kapara. Good. Then we have the next part of the Mishnah, which said, if before the verdict was finished, the Kohen Gadol died and they appointed a second Kohen Gadol, then what you do is you go free by the death of the second Kohen Gadol. And we learned that from the Pasuk. The Gemara learned it from the Pasuk where it says, Asher Mashach Oso, means the one who is anointed by his time. Then we had the case of if a guy was tried in court and there was a verdict when there was no Kohen Gadol, or somebody who kills a Kohen Gadol, or a Kohen Gadol himself who killed, all three of those cases you're going to Gullus forever. And the Mishnah explains, when you go to Gullus, you're not, now this is going in general, every time you go to Gullus, assuming the Kohen Gadol died, you don't go out for any reason, not for aid, not for testimony, not to help Klal Yisrael, nothing lets you go out. Then we said also, even if everybody in Klal Yisrael needs you, you'll stay there, you'll be buried there, you'll die there, you'll be buried there. The end of the Mishnah said, the tchum of the city also protects, not just the city itself. And then we also had, if the Rotseach goes out of his tchum, he stepped out of his free zone, then we had a machlokas. One mandamar says, it's a mitzvah for the Goel Adam to kill him and permissible for everybody else to kill him. The other mandamar says, no, it's permissible for everybody else, and anybody else who kills him won't be held accountable for it. Then we had the Gemara said, if a person got a verdict and then he died, a verdict he's supposed to go to Gullus, he died, you bring his bones and you bury it in the Miklat. Alternatively, if a guy went to Gullus and he died there and he was buried there, and then the Kohen Gadol died, you'll actually take him out of there and you'll bury him. And the Gemara brought psukim for that. And then we had this machlokas over here, which is where the guy went to Gullus, and then the Kohen Gadol, at the time of his verdict, was found to be a ben grusha. Do we look at it as if there was a Kohen Gadol, but now the Kuna Gadola stopped, it died, and therefore you can now go, the guy never went to Gullus. So there was a verdict. That's the case that Rashi speaks, that the Gemara speaks out. There was a verdict. The guy never went to Gullus yet, and then you found out before you went to Gullus, you found out the Kohen Gadol was a ben grusha. So one mandamar says that's like the Kohen Gadol dying, and therefore you don't have to go. The other mandamar says that's like not like the Kohen Gadol dying. That's like being revealed that there never was a Kohen Gadol at the time, and therefore the halacha is you go to Gullus and you stay there forever. The Gemara tried saying this dependent on the machlokas Rebbe Eliezer and Rebbe Yeshua. Rebbe Eliezer, if one brought karbanis and then he was found to be a ben grusha, Rebbe Eliezer says all the karbanis retroactively are possible. Seemingly he matches up with the one who says it's like having a verdict without a Kohen Gadol, and the Gemara says you're right, he does match up like that. The other mandamar can't fit into him. But Rebbe Yeshua, who says all the karbanos retroactively are still good, now in Rebbe Yeshua there seems to be an argument. One mandamar says, just like Rebbe Yeshua says retroactively everything's good over there, so too over here, retroactively, he was still a Kohen Gadol, and it's like the Kohen Gadol is stopped now. The other mandamar says, no, Rebbe Yeshua is only saying that over there by karbanos, where we had a special pasuk telling us that it atones for the karbanos will let it slide. But over here, who says we'll say that? And here, retroactively, we'll say there never was a Kohen Gadol.